We've never seen a moment in history, in American history, where when CPI has printed successively above 5%, five or 6 years ago, I approached Twitter about what I would have called a friendly activist, myself and another large fund. And the reality is there's a lot of data that sits in the public domain that you can use to get a very clear view of Twitter's advantages and disadvantages. And so, all of these issues that Twitter is dealing with has been known for a long time to people that spent any time analyzing the stock, comparing it to other social media stocks. So I just don't understand what all of this is about. At the end of the day, a person that had a point of view has changed their mind. Get to the bottom of what that person thinks. But going on these broad fishing expedition, I think, is just really stupid. Can I just say, as a user, okay?
Commentary.
The bot issue is really real. How many accounts are there which have 20 or 30 followers that just spew vitriol, either positive or negative, constantly every time you tweet anything? It makes tweeting impossible. I used to be an ardent user of Twitter, and I think in the last year it has become exceptionally unusable.
Well,
probably gets to 4,200, 4,300. Look, it's always important from my
trading at
perspective.
4,150 today, just so people know.
Yeah, it's always important from my perspective to just take the other side and just intellectually debate with oneself why the other side could be right. So at this point right now, what people would say is, okay, the Fed's going to capitulate at the beginning part of 2023. We have a pretty clear forecast for all the rate increases that have to happen. Everybody's doing the work that's necessary, either raising prices, cutting costs, or doing both, letting people go, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe we're there. Okay, so what's the other side of that? Well, I think, again, as I've stated before, the other side starts with energy. And the reason why I think it's important is that it really is the conflation of an economic system and a political system using an instrument. And if you look inside of what's happening in Europe, there's a lot of complexities here that I think need to get unpacked. So, for example, a couple days ago, the French government basically said that they're going to start producing less nuclear energy. And you'd say, well, why would they do that? Well, it turns out because, the temperatures are so high, you cannot use the water to cool these nuclear reactors because the exiting water is then so hot that it would actually destroy the ecosystem of the lakes and rivers that they use to feed natural fresh water in to cool the nuclear reactor. Second, because it's so hot, all the rivers are below their natural level. Barges that carry coal and nat gas are getting stuck on the Danube. The Po, which is the longest river in Italy that feeds all the fields, actually is below the level where it can actually offload the water. So farmers can't basically do what they need to do to produce a food supply. So if you play all of that out, you start to see an issue where by, October, November of this year, we're back into the same complexity where energy is the tip of the spear around which everybody starts to debate all of the national security issues that we have to deal with, the Ukraine war, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I mean, you've made a lot of money this year by basically doing the following, which is the exact opposite of everybody else. When everybody else was freaking out, had you bought, you would have made a ton of money. Now everybody's like, it's over. And you can tell that by looking at the VIX, which is the volatility index. We're about to get into the high teens. You have systematically, it has been true that when the VIX is in the teens, you tend to basically buy volatility, which is essentially you get short stocks. And when the VIX is in the 30s, you tend to basically sell volatility and you buy equities because we've hit the bottom. If you've been doing that for the last year, you've made a ton of money. So there you have it. I really don't know what's going to happen from here, but I tend to think things still have to get a lot worse to flush everything through the system. And there's less demand. The crazy sad thing about this whole thing with Biden was that OPEC came back and they basically said we can increase like 600,000 barrels a day. But the only two countries that are able to do it were, I think, Kuwait and Saudi. And the total number of barrels is about 100,000. So I'll say it again. I've said it now 5 pods in a row. We've never seen a moment in history, in American history, where when CPI has printed successively above 5%, that it got under 5% without Fed funds getting to that same number. So we should all hope that this is the exception that proves the rule, but there's an enormous amount of data that would tell you that we have to take rates to double what the equilibrium rate is thought to be, right? They're right. Like there's always stuff going on in markets, and markets represent the collective sum of our wishes and expectations and also the realities. This is why I think, for me at least, the way that I process this information is not trying to have an opinion on any one of those things, because I find it too hard. And I don't have enough depth of understanding of any of those things. For me, I'd rather go back to the historical trends, because those I find a little bit easier to parse. And whether any of those things are true and baked
Chamath,
into inflation right now or not.
Can they turn that radio down?
Jason, we're just talking some. This is boat. I'll just be honest with you. So they're trying to get it done as quickly. No, but listen. So the real problem is that, like, if I go back to the historical artifacts, have there been issues in the past the way that, Friedberg described? Absolutely. So this is why I think you can look at the fact that whenever there's inflation and whenever it's spiked, what has had to happen by the Fed is you have to take rates above that key 5% threshold when CPI is above 5% to break enough demand so that the economy's reset. And I think that's where we are. So instead of trying to figure out whether, the Brazil thing as an example that Friedberg said is crazy. Like he's basically, he said publicly in a press release, the army's on my side and it's ready to help me, keep and stay in. Like, just the craziest thing. So what are you supposed to do?
The fighters need to take to the streets. It's like
so what are you supposed to do? In my opinion, I'm like, you know what? A version of Brazil has happened before. I don't know enough history, quite honestly, to know the specifics of what happened then and how that could translate to now. And I don't want to spend the time understanding what's going to happen in Brazil right now. I'd rather just say there are 20 or 30 things that could very much complicate the world economy. I think the reality is that governments need to flush all this excess money out of the system so that we can really find out what equilibrium demand is and get back to normal. I've done this on the pod for 2 years now. That era of cheaper, faster, better is over. And what comes with that is better national security, but the cost of that better national security is higher prices.
Higher prices, less growth.
And there's nothing that we can do to avoid that. I'm not sure I agree with the less growth. I actually think that there's enough excess slack to be absorbed by all of this free money that I think you can still have sustained growth, but it will come with higher interest rates and higher inflation and higher input costs. Everybody will have to do their part to absorb some of this, but that's what's going to happen. And I think we should just deal with the medicine as quickly as possible. This is why the people that actually think that the Fed should just be very aggressive and get this over with quickly, I suspect on the margins are right. The problem is they don't want to look at the historical artifact, because the historical artifact would say, wait, I need to raise interest rates by another 250 basis points. That's just way too disruptive for what the world is ready to hear right now. So we're going to incrementally plod along. And I think what Friedberg says is right, which is that there's going to be a whack-a-mole that emerges. That's going to tilt the markets. Then the consumer credit thing will implode. That's going to tilt the markets. Then Jair Bolsonaro will try to take over Brazil. That'll tilt the markets. And we'll go back to this, inflationary, fragmented, deglobalized view of the world that just frankly takes higher interest rates to normalize. All right. We all said the first part. And nobody talked about that second part. And the only person who, which is Josh Hawley, who's, not exactly my favorite person in the world, but maybe Sachs wants to comment, was the only one that actually said, which is probably the fair thing, which Jason, you are saying is part of the deal. It is not part of the deal. No. Do you actually think that this trip to Taiwan actually strengthened our relationship with Taiwan? Did we come out with a deal? No, but so 6 months from now, when all the fruits and vegetables that have been embargoed and not sent to Taiwan, and then the sand that allows them to make chips continues to not flow, do you think that they'll still be positive about the trip?